burn, that's even better. So you just have to think of it like that. And the more you sharpen the blade, and the more you use the same stones. That's why, like with Murray Carter, he says, you know, use the same stones, same technique. Get familiar with what you're doing. And it's a similar, Cliff was saying the similar thing. You know, because this is the best tool you'll have for sharpening, is freehand, if you ask me, because you can tell what's going on with the blade. You can feel what's going on when you're sharpening, when it's going across. You can tell when it's sharp, when it's dull, how high the angle is, you know, all sorts of stuff. Because if I do too high angle, it'll cut into the stone, you know, and it'll make a noise. You'll feel it, you know. When you're right where you want to be, you'll have a feeling that is just of kind of the same, of just rubbing the edges around the stone. It's just the same type of feeling of just rubbing the flats on the stone. You get a similar feeling when your angle is right. You can tell this, and you can see this is leaving mud on my towel over here. So this is starting to stick. So this, now I think we're done with the Superstone, Nano Superstone 400. So these can go over here to dry. That's one thing I do like about the Splash and Go stones, is because I live in a kind of humid, wet climate, and it helps to dry out the stones when they're Splash and Go, because they just dry out in a couple hours or less than an hour. With soaking stones, they can stay wet for up to a couple days. I got to keep them in fresh air for a couple days with like paper towel or something under them for them to dry out. If I try to do anything else, like put them away, do anything that they're not just laying out flat, just drying, they'll start getting moldy and gross and stuff, and you don't want moldy sharpening stones. It's not fun. It can make you sick, and you don't want to get sick. So we've got the I got this stone especially for straight razors, the Chosera 1K, but I figured it would go good with pocket knives also. So what I'm gonna just do is just sit here and cross the scratch pattern, since we're pretty close to being sharp, because I want to show you we're probably able to cut this pretty easily. Yeah, see, we can push cut this now. Let's see what it's like with phone book paper. Oh, that's ripping. That's not really cutting yet. It slices of phone book paper against the grain. This is with the grain. With the grain, it'll just push cut. That's easy. So we're pretty much where we want to be. We're just going to do some pretty much edge refinement now. So I'm going to be crossing the scratch pattern. You see I'll go angle this way, then I'll come at a 90-degree angle for that pass. Then I'll angle it at 45. And Cliff taught me this a long time ago. And this is one of the amazing things he taught me, along with micro beveling, was to cross the scratch pattern, because you can just do amazing things when you cross the scratch pattern. Because naturally doing alternating passes like I'm doing doesn't raise a burr. And if you do raise a burr, it's a really fine one, and it just flip-flops when you go, and you can even feel it, you know what I mean? And this stone is super smooth, and you can feel everything you're doing. I see why straight razors like it. And these straight razors, they start out on this 1K stone. Usually for a knife, this is where people stop. There's a thing with straight razors where they say, with knives, straight razors start where knives stop. You know, which is kind of a funny saying, and it's not exactly true, because a lot of people go higher than 1K. But this is where they start out. This is where they set their bevels. And so we're pretty much done with this stone. That's all we needed. We just needed to refine the scratch pattern a little bit, which we did. This feels a lot sharper. I can feel it grabbing my finger prints already. So this is going to get wiped off and set over to dry. The next stone we have is a monster of a stone. The stone is gigantic. It's the Nano Tashi 2K, excuse me. Green Brick of Joy is its nickname, and this thing is amazing. It polishes higher than it appears for the 2K. Really polishes nicely, and this stone is also like the Super Stone. And you really got to run this wet, or you will take chunks out of it. You'll just carve chunks out of it. And I have a chunk over here where I took a big thing out of it because it wasn't dry enough. I mean, it wasn't wet enough. It got too dry. And this is pretty much a splash and go stone. It's not listed as a splash and go stone, but it really doesn't leave any bubbles when you soak it. And this thing is super smooth. But this also, I'm gonna do the flats to the stone again for the primary grind, just to raise some mud, because this mud also does the same thing as the 400 Nanowa Superstone and the 1K King, regular 1K King stone, is that it and you can kind of see it. It's kind of leaving a shot peened look to kind of graying the steel out, and it also polishes a little bit, which is awesome for what we're trying to do, which is go to a high grit. And so I'm just going to do a couple quick scrubbing passes, and then I'm going to go to crossing the scratch pattern, alternating passes again. We don't have to do that much work on this stone because we are pretty close to being where we want to be. We've just got 2 more stones before we get to the 8K, and then we go to the Spyderco Ultrafine. And see, that's shined up nicely. Everywhere. And I can feel it. Probably shouldn't shave. Let's see. The push cuts this alright. It's starting to get to where it push cuts at an angle. Not at a true 90. It's not really there yet, but get it at a 45. It seems to be cutting everywhere. So we're in good shape. Let's see if it'll cut a curve. Yeah, kinda. Alright. So wipe this stone off, set it over to dry, and now I'm going to my smaller stone. This is a little pocket knife stone. It's a Sahiro 1K 3K. You see them advertised on Amazon all the time. If you just type in like sharpening stone, this one comes up. I've dropped it a couple times. It's old. This is like 7 years old. It's been used a lot, as you can see. I mostly use the 3K side on it because that's the side I need for my grit, and it's a soak stone, so it takes a couple minutes to soak, about 10-15 minutes until the air bubbles stop bubbling. But it's a perfectly servable stone. These first 2 stones I got were a small 220 by 220 and 1K King, and this 3K and 1K and 3K Sahiro. And I pretty much used up that 220 1K King. It's basically a sliver, but this one is still around. I think this is also a resin base. So Sharpen the flats, raise a little bit of a slurry. I'm not sure what kind of bevel grind pattern that leaves. Take that off to dry. But I'm assuming it leaves a colloidal type of pattern, just because it feels like one. Then I'm going to go to my Woodstock SteelX Woodstock 1K 6K. The cool thing about this stone, you see it's dirty, you just rub it, comes right off. It's been dropped. I've had this thing since 2014 or 15 or something. I've used this as my main stone for a long time. And this is a pretty good stone. Only problem is you got to soak it, and then it's got to dry forever in the humidity that I'm in. So it's only negative about it. Otherwise, it's a perfectly good stone. It's got a nice creamy feel. Sharpens nicely. Stays pretty flat. You don't lose a lot of it.